So sometimes you start the month with some pretty lofty reading goals, like reading 5 books in a month, all of which were about 200 to 300 pages, and some of which you've been avoiding reading for a long time. And you realize about halfway through the month that you're still on that first book that has been sitting on your shelf for 3 years. And maybe there was a reason. Not that any of the books I read in May were bad, they just took up a lot more time and I was less motivated to read them than I have been in a long time. So I'm gonna go over them, and I've decided to not discuss my June reading plans because I don't want to set that false expectation about how much I'm gonna read. So I'm just gonna talk about these books. I read 3 in May, one of which took 2 weeks out of the month. And I definitely have a new favorite out of these books, so I consider that a win. And I'm actually going to start with that. I'm going to go backwards. So the book that I just finished on May 31st, so it counts, was Stefan Zweig's Beware of Pity. I did get to this one. This book was absolutely incredible. I found it to be so compelling, such a specific phenomenon that I've never read about, that of pity, and how that can be self-serving and how it can quickly be construed with empathy or sympathy, but it ends up looking different and you end up just feeling bad for that person. So this follows a soldier named Hoffmiller who is kind of just going through the motions. He didn't really have any say in becoming a soldier. This is set in Austria pre-World War I. And if you know anything about history, you'll know that Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination is what kickstarted World War I in Austria and in the rest of the world. So that kind of isn't necessarily looming because that was kind of a surprise attack, but it does come up towards the end and kind of serves as justification for forgetting about a lot of what occurs in this book, all of the ill will that Hoffmiller causes. Basically, he, like I said, is going through the motions. He's not really an active participant in his own life until he is invited to this estate. I can't say the Austrian name. It's like Kikalshvava or something like that. But he is invited to their estate, and in all of the hullabaloo, he realized that he forgot to ask the daughter of the estate to dance. So he goes up, he asks her, but he fails to realize that she is disabled. She cannot walk both of her legs. She walks on crutches, and she wears these metal braces. And Hoffmiller, he is just absolutely embarrassed. He flees the scene. He can't even handle facing any repercussions from that slip up, which is a very innocent thing to do. She was wearing a blanket over her legs. He had only seen her at dinner. Very understandable mistake. It's not like he knew anyone else there who was going to be like, hey, she can't dance, she can't walk. So he is just completely blows this out of proportion. He feels so bad. So he begins to go over there. He bought her flowers, and he kind of just begins this relationship with the family. Her name's Edith, and then it's her dad, who is the head of the estate, and then her cousin and their servants, like their butler and housemaid. And he just forms a relationship with them. They begin to depend on him for light in their house, for happiness. And it just completely is kept a secret from the other aspects of Hoffmiller's life. And he keeps it that way because, like I said, this is about pity. He pities her. He's not proud that he has to go over there. He feels obligated to. This book is about him struggling to establish his autonomy, struggling to develop relationships that are outside of what has been assigned for him through becoming a soldier that, his family encouraged him and basically forced him to do. And it just escalates, it devolves, and it is just done. The writing is so beautiful. You really follow along with Hoffmiller's feelings, and it creates that unreliability that I always love to read. So I really, really enjoyed this. I tried not to spoil anything. I hope I kind of, most of that is on the back. So it just really you kind of can sense what is coming. There are signs of certain behaviors and actions that are to come throughout the book. Still, when it happens, it's still a surprise because you don't expect them to actually go through with certain things or for actual things to come to light. And it was just, I love NYRBs. I feel like they have such a great selection. They're always such interesting stories that I don't think I would have ever thought I would read a book about pity before, but I'm so glad I did. And I would like to thank Melissa, the post office girl, on YouTube. This is one of her favorite books, and I think it's like her username on like TikTok or something. And the post office girl is another one of his books. So clearly she's a fan, and she has every right to be a fan because his writing is incredible. So I definitely recommend this. So next, the book that took up a lot of my month was indeed Chuck Klosterman's The 90s. I have mixed feelings. I think this is a classic 3 out of 5 for me because I just wasn't as interested in a lot of the topics that he discussed as I thought I was going to be, because when I think of the 90s, I think of classic MTV Disney cartoons. I think of Leonardo DiCaprio. On, the pop culture side, I think of all the music. I think of Nirvana, which is definitely discussed, and I learned a lot about Nirvana. I learned a lot about the makings of Titanic, for example. It's where Leo comes in. What I enjoyed the most was his explanation of technology and just the trust in the present moment that people had before the rise of the internet, before cell phones, social media. Things were just so less connected, and you had to have more faith in the people around you to go through with their word and be where they say they're going to be and all of those things. So I think reading about that was really interesting and kind of what had drawn me to this book initially, because I think it's so fascinating to read about and hear about life before social media because it's so prevalent in today's time. And I mean, social media is how I found out about this book. A lot of the political things I did find very interesting, but I wouldn't say necessarily compelled me. It's broken up into really long essays, and I found myself losing interest throughout each essay, but I was able to power through. This just wasn't necessarily something that I felt super compelled to read, even though it was easy to read and did explore topics that I expected it to. For the most part, I still just wasn't vibing with it. And you can't force that, but I did want to finish it because, as I've mentioned, I had it on my bookshelf for so long and it was just time. I wanted to take it off my TBR, and I have, which I think may have also led to my kind of indifference to it, because I was like, well, this is just a book that would have interested me maybe 3 years ago when I originally bought it. And I think I mentioned that in my last video, that I just have that problem where I don't read books right when I buy them. I let them sit, and sometimes that dilutes the interest that I previously had. That was definitely the case with this book. He discusses the Mandela effect. He discusses the O.J. Simpson case. He discusses these best-selling artists that I've never heard of. So I did overall find it to be, like I said, like a 3 out of 5. It was interesting, some parts more interesting than others, more compelling, but overall I don't think I would read this for pleasure. I think this was definitely more something that would aid in research that I would do about this decade, about authors in this decade or something like that. I don't think it's necessarily a read that you cozy up with this book and have your glass or have your cup of tea type of book. It's more educational, and I think maybe I just wasn't in the mood for that. Okay, lastly, this is gonna be a short little video because, like I said, I only read 3. I read Sabahattin Ali's Madonna in a Fur Coat, which, similar to the 90s, I was not super impressed. It follows a man who, it's told through a notebook that he had written. So it starts with a different guy, and he begins working at this firm with this one other guy who translates paperwork into German, and it's set in Turkey. So he translates works from Turkish to German, and he is extremely disrespected by the other staff. He is alone in this tiny office until the original narrator comes onto the scene, and He is older, he's in poor health, and this new worker starts to develop a friendship with him and is kind of the only one that's by his side. And the night before the older man passes away, the young man reads his diary that was in the pull-out drawer at his office, and it's about this love story between the older man and this artist whose painting he is absolutely enraptured by, and he has to find her, and they develop a relationship, but it's never enough for either of them, and so it just ends up not working out. And I was under the impression that it was not going to be a happy ending, and it was not. I think it might have to do with the translation. I believe if I spoke or read Turkish, I would enjoy this a lot more, but the translation into English made it a lot more formal and just kind of like A to Z writing. Like it was like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and there wasn't that kind of poetry within the lines that I was expecting. And I was also just I wasn't rooting for either of them. I knew that their love story was doomed from the start. They each had unrealistic expectations about each other. In that regard, I found it to be I was just uninterested in both of the characters. Nothing really made me want them to end up together. I found that their conversations were very kind of fake deep, like they just were trying to establish this connection with each other, but neither of them were in a place to do so. And I might, be of a contrary opinion when I'm discussing this book, but I just don't consider it to be a miniature masterpiece like the National says on the back. What I did enjoy was this young man going out and forging his own path, leaving his family, and although he eventually does go back to Turkey, he still had that independence, which I really admire in a protagonist. And I did enjoy the kind of secondhand narration because similar to Beware of Pity, which was also told secondhand or recollecting the events that happened in the past, I do think that kind of blurs the lines between what was true and what memory and nostalgia has kind of coded over. So that appears to be a theme of my books this month. They all deal with the past, nostalgia, memory, which are themes that I always really enjoy to read. Although some executed it better than others, I'm glad to have read the books that I did this month. And next month, I hope to have a few more to talk about. But yeah, as always, thank you for tuning in. Apologies for kind of the shorter video this month, but I just wanted to come on here and quickly summarize what occupied my reading in May, and I hope you'll stick around in another month or so for when I make my June video. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.